It sounds like the Detroit Pistons will be going with the new starting lineup as opposed to the one we have seen since the trade deadline. Is this a good move? Is this new starting lineup a good idea? We'll talk about all that and break it all down in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Kuka Hill. You can find me over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. In today's episode, is brought to you by Grammarly. Make a bigger impact at work with Grammarly. Sign up and download for free at Grammarly.com/podcast. In today's episode, we'll talk about Cade Cunningham looking like he's unlocking a new or maybe an old part of his game. And also we'll talk about a recent Pistons transaction that they did involving one of their, one of their former best backup bigs and what this means. We'll talk about that a little later. But we're going to start off with the news that it sounds like the Pistons will be employing a new starting lineup. And maybe it's not new because it did start in this last game against the Chicago Bulls where they did win. They did beat the Chicago Bulls with this new starting lineup. But before that game against the Bulls, they had a different starting lineup the previous 6-7 games since the trade deadline on February 8th. And it sounds like they will be moving forward with the starting lineup of Cade, Ivy, Ausar, Isaiah Stewart, and Jalen Duren. I just want to break down the entire process of this decision making and whether this is the right move. So let's start with the older starting lineup, the one we saw before this last game against the Bulls. That starting lineup had Cade Cunningham, Jane Ivey, Ausar Thompson, Simone Fontecchio, and Jalen Duren. Now, the first place I want to go with this is just the process. If you guys have listened to the podcast for a while, you guys know I'm a big proponent of process over results. Because if it's bad process that leads to good results, it's not sustainable. Just because you had bad process and it led to good results one time doesn't mean it's going to be sustainably good results. You're eventually going to run into those bad results because it's not good process. Good process eventually will lead to good results. That is a big belief of mine. So and you'll see why we're staying with that point in a little bit. But let's just go with the process. The process behind that starting lineup, the idea behind that starting lineup is you have Cade and Ivy, who are your main ball handlers, obviously, with your core four guys in Cade, Ivy, Ausar, Duren. What do those guys need around them? They need a shooter because Ausar and Duren is not going to provide that outside spacing. You can provide spacing in other ways. We've talked about that many times on the podcast, but they need an outside shooter and not just one, which is something we've talked about on the podcast a lot. Not just someone who is going to be a standing catch and shooter. That does not provide the same type of space. They need a movement shooter. They need a guy that can consistently attack closeouts, a guy who knows how to move without the ball beyond the three-point line, find his spots. They need someone that provides that type of gravity. And that is what Simone Fontecchio was bringing to that squad. And they were playing really well. That was the process behind it. They had defense with Ausar, guarding the other team's best player most of the time. He helped on the glass with Duren because he's a good rebounder for his position. Fontecchio also was active on the glass. He is a fine defender as well. So, like prior to the trade deadline, you had to go with Bojan maybe in that spot. That's just a horrific defender. You're having to basically choose offense over defense at that point. No, with Fontecchio, you're getting a balance of both with Ausar and him on the wings. And you got that spacing. You got that spacing. You can try to work things out in the half-court offense because you have that movement shooter. And then on defense, you're not just completely forfeiting by having a Bojan out there or Alec Burks out there. You have a Fontecchio with Ausar and Duren on the glass. So the process of it made sense. You got that movement shooter with them. Now, would it provide good results? Because, again, you can have good process and maybe it just doesn't result in good results. I said that twice. Maybe it doesn't happen that way because the players just aren't good enough. However, that wasn't the case with the starting lineup. In the 7 games, now it is just 7 games, okay? It was a small sample, but everything we're talking about now is going to be a small sample because it's since the trade deadline, since they completely reshaped their roster. In the 7 games since the trade deadline, The Pistons were 15th in the NBA in defensive rating. Since that trade deadline, since those moves were made, they were 15th in the NBA in defensive rating. In all of these games, Isaiah Stewart was not a part of this team. He was not a part of this team. So I know the big argument is, oh, well, this team's just good. It's horrible without Isaiah Stewart on defense. Well, not actually. Since the trade deadline, when they actually acquired wings that can move laterally at all, they've been 15th defensively. Could they be better? Yes. Jalen Duren needs to be better defensively. But as a team, they've been middle of the pack since then. And it has a lot to do with the acquisitions of wings that can move. Along with that, the starting lineup of Cade, Ivy, Simone, Ausar, Duren had a defensive rating of 110.4. That was their defensive rating. That would rank 10th in the entire NBA. So those 5 guys were playing at a top 10 defensive level. They had a net rating of plus 4.7. They were winning their minutes. They were playing extremely well together. And the Pistons were not losing games during that streak because of the starting lineup. The starting lineup was consistently outplaying the other team's starting lineup. They lost games because Monty Williams wanted to play 11 guys in the first 15 minutes of NBA action, play 5-man bench lineups that were getting outscored by 1,000. And the starters would have to come back in and try to fight from a deficit. That's what was happening. The starting lineup was working great. They were playing extremely well together. Extremely well. And the process made sense. You had spacing while having some defense. You weren't just forfeiting either side of the basketball. It was making things flow better in the half-court offense. Fontecchio spacing and his ability to attack closeouts was helping. Like all that stuff. The process made sense, and it was providing good results. They were playing really well. Now, let's enter in the new starting lineup, which is Cade, Ivy, Ausar, Stu, and Duren. Let's start the same way. Process. Does that make sense process-wise? No, it does not make sense because Stu, Ausar, and Duren are not going to provide any type of spacing gravity. They're not going to. They're not going to provide spacing. In the game against the Bulls, you can look many times. Stu was 1 of 5, I believe, in the first half against the Bulls. The Bulls were asking him to shoot threes. Cade and Ivy could not get paint touches because either Andre Drummond, Nikola Vucevic, whoever it was that was guarding Stu, was just standing in the paint and was saying, if you guys want a result, if you guys want your end result of your offensive possession to be an Isaiah Stewart 3, we will take that every day of the week. And in the first half, they were winning that. Now, Stu did make 2 in the third quarter, but despite that, they were not going to change the defensive coverage, and it's something I've told you guys since the offseason. Stu is not going to be a good enough shooter this year at any point, and it's not going to provide any of the type of, all of his threes are basically all wide open catch and shoot threes. They're all wide open because the defense wants them to be wide open. It's not like he's getting threes off of movement, or coming off screens, or anything like that. He's getting threes because the defenses want him to take threes. Those are the only shots he's taking. He's not taking semi-contested threes. He's only taking wide open ones. So even when he makes them pay, he hits 2 and a quarter like he did in the third quarter. Defenses are not going to change their coverages. So now you've got Ausar, Stu, and Duren who are not going to provide that, and it's going to make life, it just not even just looking at what's actually happened. Just the process of that is, I have 2 ball handlers who like to get to the paint, who like to get to the rim and kick out. Are they going to be able to do that with 3 guys that won't command the defense to respect them beyond the arc? No, that just, you can put 2 and 2 together and say, no, that does not make sense. It doesn't. So that's the process of it. Now, defensively, they'll probably be really good because obviously defensively with Ausar and Stu, they'll be good defensively. But in the half-court offensively, does the process make sense? No. And what happens when the process doesn't make sense in the half-court offensively when you have Cade and Ivy? I guarantee you, we'll see how it plays out, but I'm willing to bet that the turnovers will skyrocket because the spacing is going to be tough, and it's going to be tighter windows. It's going to be tighter driving lanes. I guarantee you turnovers will go up. I guarantee you paint touches will go down by your lead guards. I guarantee you Ivy and Cade will not get the same amount of shots at the rim that they were previously with this other starting lineup. And you basically will be asking Cade and Ivy, which we'll talk about in the second segment, to survive off of jumpers. A lot of jumpers and a lot of floaters outside the paint. Because it's going to be tougher for them to get all the way to the rim. Maybe that doesn't happen, but I think just thinking logically about it, that's probably what's going to end. That's why I'm willing to bet will happen. Now let's go on to the numbers of it. That starting lineup right there. If you look at all their minutes this year, that starting lineup, they have a plus 8.3 net rating. They have a defensive rating of 105.1 and an offensive rating of 113.4. So if you look at that, you will say, oh, well, cool. What are you talking about? It looks like it's thriving. Let me break it down for you. That lineup has 63 minutes played together, okay? 63 minutes played together. The Cade, Ivy, Asar, Stu, Durant. It has 63 minutes played together on the season. They played 23 of those minutes together against the Bulls. What happened in that game against the Bulls? The Bulls shot the worst three-point percentage we have seen since 2014. They shot 2 of 19. What does a lot of missed threes lead to? It leads to a lot of long rebounds. What do a lot of long rebounds lead to? Transition opportunities, fast break opportunities, early offense opportunities. So the Pistons were not having to live off their half-court sets. They were getting a lot of early offense, transition, fast break. They were able to keep the pace up because the Bulls were shooting threes and missing them at a historical rate. Not just because some of it maybe you'll say is because of the Pistons defense. If you go back and watch every three the Bulls took in that game, a lot of them were wide open. A lot of them were open. The Bulls just didn't hit them. So 23 of those minutes came against that, in that context. And in that context, they were fantastic. That starting lineup played fantastic in those 23 minutes. Is it because of their own defense? Is it because of their own player? Does a lot of it have to do with the fact that the Bulls just weren't hitting anything and leading to transition opportunities? I tend to say that second part. The reason why I tend to say that second part is because if you take those 23 minutes out, just that Bulls game, and look at the sample of before the Bulls game that they played together. They played 40 minutes before that. In those 40 minutes, they had a negative 14.4 net rating. They had a 103.4 offensive rating and a 117.8 defensive rating. So if you just remove the Bulls game where they played 23 minutes in that game, and the Bulls shot the worst three-point shooting performance since 2004, 10 years ago, a decade. The worst three-point shooting performance of a decade. If you just remove that performance, they've been a terrible lineup together. Why? Because the process matches the eye test. That if you have these guys on the floor together, driving lanes get tight. Turnovers will skyrocket. They won't get enough good quality three-point looks off. Ivy and Cade won't get to the rim as much. And what does that lead to? Turnovers will lead to easy buckets for the other team. A lot of missed shots, just like the Bulls did, will lead to early offense for the other team. So no matter how good you are in the half court in a set defense, you won't even get to set up in that half court defense because you're constantly turning the ball over, missing shots, not getting good quality shots off, and leading to early offense for the other team. So to end this all off, do I agree with this new starting lineup? Absolutely not. The other one made sense logically, process-wise, and made sense eye test-wise, and backed up by the numbers, and backed up by the performance you watched every single night with that starting lineup. It made sense from the get-go, and then it confirmed that it made sense. This lineup doesn't make sense process-wise. You clearly see where the problems are going to arise. And before the game against the Bulls, where the Bulls had a historically bad shooting performance, the bad process matched the bad results. So we'll see how it goes the rest of the year. Maybe somehow it just completely flips, and the logic doesn't match what ends up happening on the court, and it ends up being a tremendous lineup. Maybe that ends up happening. I'm not willing to bet that. And I don't understand why, when the core four should be your main priority. When the core four guys should be your main priority, and the process says start a guy like Fontecchio that provides movement shooting, and then the process leads to great results with those guys, they were playing great basketball, why you're then changing it to force Isaiah Stewart as a starting power forward when the process doesn't make sense to do so, and it makes it sound, in the process and the eye test before the Bulls game says you're making life harder on all of them on offense by doing so. I don't know why you do that, but it is what it is. We'll see how it plays out. Long first segment, but I think it was worth it. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. When we come back, Cade Cunningham is unlocking a new/old part of his game that will take him to the level of superstardom in the future, if it's here to stay. We'll talk about what that is when we come back. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. Whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you with players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So let's see who Josh has picked out for us on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. And a pick that I really like here is DeAndre Hunter. DeAndre Hunter is shooting well, and with Trae Young out, the touches and shot attempts will spike. Trae Young going out, that's a lot of usage for the Hawks that just is gone. That has to be replaced by somebody. And I'm sure it'll be spread out a little bit throughout the team, but I think Josh did a great job in singling out DeAndre Hunter. I think his shot attempts will go up. I think his usage will go up, and I think he's going to fare well with that. I love that pick of DeAndre Hunter. Few other picks that Josh has here that I agree with. There's one in particular, I'd say Benedict Mathurin. He's in the career best form, posting numbers in multiple categories. Concerns of consistency, but while he's rolling, and if he keeps rolling, he's 100% going to be worth using. Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball is going to help you win your fantasy championship, and eBay Motors knows a championship team. It's about each player being a perfect fit, and it's the same thing with your vehicle. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack, bumpers, wherever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or you'll get your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply at ebaymotors.com. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. Cade Cunningham has been playing absurdly well since the trade deadline. Not only does he look more like the player, actually, he looks, I won't say exactly like the player, he looks close to the player that we saw before he suffered that knee sprain against the Nuggets that lasted for 34 games. A 34-game spree of how well Cade was playing, that he looks closer to that guy. Now that he looks healthy, he had a chance to take the All-Star break, let his knee heal. He's looked fantastic. He looks close to that guy. You might be wondering, well, cool, why do you say close to that guy? Because close to that guy would insinuate, or the same as that guy would insinuate, that he's actually playing worse. Because right now he's actually playing better than that guy was. Those 34 games, he's actually playing better. It's close because it's not close in a worse way. It's close in a better way. He's playing better than that guy. Over these last 4 games, he's averaging 28.5 points, 6.3 assists, 5.5 rebounds. He's shooting 59% from the floor, 57% from deep, only getting 3.8 free throw attempts a game, which we'll talk about that another day. I can't do the free throw stuff with Cade. He gets a terrible whistle. But and in 2 of those games, by the way, he didn't even get a free throw attempt. Just pure ethics, just pure hoops, man. Pure hoops coming from Cade Cunningham. Foul grifting, nah, don't need it. Flopping, don't need it. Don't need no free throws. We go out there and get straight buckets. So Cade's been playing extremely well. And one of the biggest reasons he is playing so well over these last 4 games, and one of the biggest reasons outside of the brief, like 4 to 5 game stretch after he came back from his knee injury that he was struggling a little bit, which I think, actually, you know what? Let me not say that. He wasn't playing that well the 4 or 5 games after his knee sprain when he returned. Outside of that stretch, the reason why he's having such a good season, which he's having a really good season, one of the biggest reasons why is his 3-point shooting. His 3-point shooting has absolutely skyrocketed this year. His previous 2 seasons, previous season, because last year he only played 12 games. That doesn't count. So his rookie season, he shot 31% from deep. In those 12 games last year, he was shooting 28% from deep, and then he got hurt. But he was dealing with the shin injury, obviously. So through 2 seasons, if you want to count it, it's really just 76 games. He was shooting 30% from deep. That is terrible. Not good at all. And if you remember, coming out of the draft, one of the reasons why Cade was everyone was so high on him as a prospect, people were talking about him as just a next level can't miss prospect, was because of his ability to score from all 3 levels and his ability to hit outside shots at his size. And through the first 76 games of his career, first year, and then 12 games the second year, he just was not doing that. He just wasn't. He wasn't shooting very well. But that has changed. That has changed this year for the Detroit Pistons, for Cade Cunningham. And if he continues to shoot like this, it will unlock stardom for him. That is the part of his game that was holding him back from being the guy that everyone thought he was going to be coming out the draft. That right there is what held him back. Because his 3-point shooting wasn't at the level that people expected it to be. And not just his catch and shoot 3-point shooting, which has been good. By the way. He's shooting close to 40% on catch and shoot threes. ever since the first 12 games of the year. If you take the first 12 games of the year when he was struggling, he was starting next to Killian Hayes. He was starting next to Asar Thompson and Isaiah Stewart. Had no spacing at all. Literally, as soon as they switched to a more spaced out offensive lineup, literally as soon as they did it. So since those, eliminate the first 12 games, over the last, and this is even including that 4 to 5 game stretch when he was struggling with the knee injury coming back. Last 36 games, he's shooting 38% on pull-up threes. I am telling you right now, and he's been hitting step-back threes. He's been tearing them up from beyond the arc the last few games. But even before the last few games, he's shooting extremely well on pull-up threes, which is what he was expected to be coming out of college, what people thought he was going to be coming out of college. Step-back threes, hitting threes when guys go underneath the screen, all of that. He's shooting 38% on pull-up threes. I'm telling you right now, if he's shooting close to that, I expect it to regress a little bit, probably to like 36, 35%. Even at that level, if he hovers around 35, 36% on pull-up threes, I am telling you right now, Cade will be a superstar in the future because you will not be able to stop him. That is the only part of his game that has been lagging him back. That was the part of his game that was supposed to be with him coming out of college. It has not been there. If that part of his game is back, if that part of his game, it's a new part of his game, but also an old part of his game because it was there at Oklahoma. It was there. Oklahoma State, I'm sorry. It was there. It was not there in the first 2 years, first 76 games of his career. So it's new in the NBA. It was a part of his game in the college level. If that is back, good luck NBA trying to guard him because he's going to be unstoppable, which is what you've seen the last 4 games. If you can't just go under the screen against him, if he's able to boogie on you and hit step back threes, if he's able to dominate switches by hitting threes, not just getting to the rim, but also hitting threes when the big man gives them space because they're switched out and they don't want to get beat to the rim, good luck trying to stop him. That's not even talking about his catch and shoot threes, which has been on point all year. By the way, even including the first 12 games of the year where he wasn't hitting threes like that, he's up to 36% on the year from three, by the way. Up to 36% from three. His splits on the season, by the way. These are his splits on the season. 46% from the field, 36%, my goodness, from deep, 50% on twos, and 85% from the free throw line. He has a 55.32 shooting percentage. It's going to go up. It's going to keep going up. If you were told those were his splits before the year, everyone would have lost their minds and been like, Cade is back. That's the Cade that we expected to see coming out the draft. Because this is the Cade we're seeing. I don't understand why it took people so long to realize that's the Cade we're seeing, but that's what we're seeing finally. We are seeing that Cade take the next step. And to reference the first segment, we were talking about the starting lineup. The only way I think that starting lineup would be able to survive is if Cade remains in this heater from beyond the arc. If he's able to just survive and just destroy teams from beyond the arc, he'll survive off that because he won't have to get to the paint as much. If he's able to keep shooting like this, they'll get away with it. If he's able to keep consistently bringing 2 to the ball because they don't want him to get shots off from beyond the arc and allows his team to get 4-on-3 situations, they might be able to survive with it. Might. It's still bad process. That's just the best case scenario. Cade is playing extremely well, dude. He's looking tremendous. And that 3-point shot is going to unlock everything for him, and it's going to make him borderline unstoppable. Unstoppable. His mid-range game is on point. He continues to get to the basket, can finish at the basket. He can shoot free throws, even though he doesn't draw enough of them. No fault of his own. If he's able to bring that 3-point shot around now, with him cutting down his turnovers like he has since the first 12 games when they decided to stop with the awful spacing, even though they want to go back to it now. I guess they want turnovers to come back up. But if he continues to do all of this, that's Cade. That's the number 1 overall pick right there. That right there is the superstar prospect. That right there is the future superstar in the NBA. That's the player that everyone was waiting for. That right there. The player we have seen the last 36 games of the year, that's the player. The Pistons will be all right if that player is here. If that player is here, good luck, NBA. Good luck. The Pistons are down now. Cade's down now. Give it 2 years. Next year, give it 2 years. Good luck. Good luck. If this 3-point shot's here to stay, good luck. Let me know what you guys think. Comment section down below or over on Twitter @KookHill. Real briefly, we'll touch on the Pistons buying out Mike Muscala. What I think about that. We'll talk about that when we come back. No matter what kind of work you do, how you communicate is key. All those emails, reports, and presentations are equally important to the collaboration needed to get things done, and Grammarly can help. 96% of Grammarly users report that Grammarly helps them craft more impactful writing. Grammarly works across 500,000 apps and websites. By understanding your writing and context, Grammarly provides relevant, personalized suggestions. Their tone suggestions help you navigate even the most difficult work conversations. And for someone like myself, who before the podcast was a site expert at different blog sites, who was a writer basically before the podcast, I absolutely had to have Grammarly, and it was a lifesaver. It made my life so much easier. It is absolutely worth it. It is fantastic. Make a bigger impact at work with Grammarly. Sign up and download for free at Grammarly.com/podcast. That's GRAMMARLY.com/podcast. Easier said than done. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. Mike Muscala and the Detroit Pistons have come to an agreement on a buyout. Before I go any further into giving my thoughts on the Pistons doing this, I had to preface it with this. I have not seen, and I don't believe anyone's reported on whether Mike Muscala was asking for this, whether the Pistons wanted to do, like, we haven't had reporting on why exactly this happened. Like, was Mike Muscala not playing because he didn't want to play and was wanting a buyout? Did he ask for a buyout because he wasn't playing, because he wasn't being played, so therefore he asked for a buyout so he could go play for a contender? Because if that's what happened, like, depending on which one happened, I'm going to have two vastly different reactions. If he wasn't playing because he wanted a buyout, so they just weren't playing him, which I'm not going to lie, I don't think makes much sense, because I believe he actually did get some minutes in a recent game when someone got into foul trouble. So that could be the case, but it just doesn't make as much sense to me that that would be what happened. But I'm not ruling it off the table. It definitely is possible that's what happened. If that's what happened, I don't have much to say. I don't have much to say, and it is what it is. That's unfortunate because he was playing well for the Pistons. However, if he was bought out and asked for a buyout because he was no longer being played in the rotation, if that is the reason, I have a huge problem, massive problem, because Mike Muscala is about a 10 times better option at backup 5 than James Wiseman is. And the Pistons, from Troy Weaver to Tom Gores to Monty Williams, have all said over the last few weeks that right now is about winning. They're trying to win games. They're trying to go into the offseason on a high note. They're trying to go into the offseason having played 500 type basketball, having won quite a few games. That's what they said their goal is. Now, I know that, Monty said that was his goal, and then he proceeded an hour later to play 11 guys in the first 13 minutes of a game and play 5-man bench lineup still. Like, I understand that, what Monty says as this year is basically the opposite of what he actually does. So I take that with a grain of salt. I understand. However, if we are to take them at their word, which, I mean, like I said, I understand that may be troublesome for Pistons fans to do. But if we're going to take them at their word that they're trying to win games now, they want to win games for the rest of the year, playing James Wiseman over Mike Muscala might be a bigger sin than them playing Killian Hayes as many minutes as they were before. Like that, I'm not joking. It may be a bigger sin than that. It won't be a bigger sin than starting Killian over Ivy, but continuing to play him a lot of minutes after that, it probably is a bigger sin than that. Mike Muscala, in his minutes with the Pistons, out of any rotation player this year for the Detroit Pistons, had the largest on-off difference by far. Like, it isn't even close. His on-off was a plus 19.1. The next closest of any rotation player is Isaiah Stewart at 8.4. So over 10 points better. He allowed the Detroit Pistons to play 5 out. If you go and look at Mike Muscala and Asar Thompson lineups, they thrived. Why? Because you had a guy who could space the floor and actually drag defenses out to him beyond the arc and allowed Ausar to have so much space inside the arc to work. Backup lineups, you could play Stu with him, and you actually could go 5 out, because then you could have Stu at the 5 and run pick and pop with Stu. You can try to go 5 out with that. Those lineups just simply, it's not even about Mike Muscala himself being a good player. It's simply about the fact that he was able to space the floor out at the 5 position to where the Pistons could run 4 out, 1 in, and even 5 out lineups. They were thriving in his minutes. Thriving. Like dominating his minutes. No, like legitimately dominating his minutes just because of that. Because of the space that opened up for their other players, for their best players. They were dominating his minutes. And the argument that Monty Williams brought for not playing Mike Muscala over James Wiseman was because James Wiseman brings more defensively. When that's just flat out incorrect. The defensive rating with Mike Muscala on the floor, 107.9. When it's off, 118.5. That's a 10.6 difference. The team was 10.6 points worse defensively with him off the floor. James Wiseman, he has a 120.6 defensive rating when he's on the floor. When he's off the floor, they have a 117.9. So they're 2.7 points better with him off the floor. Look, defensive rating, just a player's single defensive stats, it's tough. They are wonky. But this big of an on-off difference matches your eye test. It'd be different if it did not match your eye test. The on-off split very clearly match your eye test. The worst defensive ratings of defensive of guys that have played rotational minutes for the Pistons: Bojan Bogdanovic, James Wiseman, Isaiah Livers, Malachi Flynn, Jaden Ivey. Does that not match our eye test? It does. So that's why I'm saying if he was bought out because, and he wasn't being played because he wanted to be bought out, so they just weren't playing him, okay, then it is what it is. It's unfortunate. If he was bought out because he was not being played and then he wanted out, because they wanted to play James Wiseman over him, that right there is just like, that would be something. Like, I don't know what would, I don't know. I seriously just would not know. And I hate the fact that I don't want to come on here and bag and go at James Wiseman. Like, I don't want to do it. But the coaching staff, and I feel like the Pistons franchise is like forcing people to talk about it. Like, no one wants to be going after James Wiseman, having to talk about this, but they keep doing it to him. They're causing more harm to him than anyone else is. James Wiseman played 16 minutes the other night. He had 5 fouls. He almost fouled out in 16 minutes of action. When he comes into the game, teams immediately go at him every single defensive possession. Like, I pray to God that the reason why he was bought out and was not being played was because he refused to play because he wanted to buy out. I'm going to pray that that was the case. Because if that was not the case, if he was simply just not being played because we were taking Monty at his word, that it was because defensive reasons, I don't know what to say. Like, I don't have anything. I seriously don't have anything. But that's my thoughts on that. Let me know what you guys think. Comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. That's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. Hit that subscribe button to the YouTube channel. Leave us a 5-star review, whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Stay safe out there. Until next time, peace out.